My name is Randy, and at 32 years old, I thought I had job security as the senior software developer who built TechVault's entire cybersecurity system from scratch. 5 years of dedication, countless all-nighters, and solving problems no one else could touch. Then came my annual review with Marcus, my new boss, who replaced my beloved mentor. I expected recognition. Instead, I got a $69 annual raise, and when I questioned it, his response changed everything. I had no idea that walking out that door would send their $55 million system spiraling into darkness. Before I dive into this workplace nightmare, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt undervalued at work. And stick around to see how standing up for yourself can shake an entire company to its foundation. Computers and I have had a special relationship since I was 8 years old. While other kids were playing outside, I was taking apart my father's desktop computer, figuring out how each component worked together. By 12, I had written my first program. By 16, I was helping local businesses troubleshoot their networks. Programming came naturally to me, like breathing or blinking. The logical patterns, the elegant solutions to complex problems, the thrill of watching code execute perfectly. It was my calling. College was both a blessing and a challenge. I majored in computer science at Berkeley, where I was one of only 17 women in a class of 112. The subtle discrimination was constant. Male classmates would explain basic concepts to me that I already understood. Group projects often meant fighting to be heard. Professors occasionally seemed surprised when I aced their exams. But I persisted, graduated with honors, and set my sights on Silicon Valley. My early career wasn't the smooth sailing I had hoped for. I bounced between startups that promised the moon but delivered micromanagement and bro culture. At one particularly toxic workplace, my ideas were ignored in meetings only to be presented by male colleagues weeks later to applause. I was considering leaving tech altogether when I received a LinkedIn message that would change everything. Eleanor Pierce, the sister of TechVault's founder, Christopher Pierce, reached out personally. She had seen some of my open-source contributions and was impressed with my security implementations. TechVault was a young cybersecurity company with big ambitions, and they needed someone with my expertise. What struck me during the interview process was how Eleanor, as the chief operating officer, spoke about building a company culture based on mutual respect and recognition of talent, regardless of gender, age, or background. When I joined TechVault, it felt like coming home. Richard Montgomery, the original chief technology officer, was a brilliant grandfatherly figure who had worked at IBM during the early days of computing. Under his leadership, technical decisions were made based on merit, not office politics. He saw my potential immediately and gave me increasing responsibility over our core products. "Randy," he told me during my 3rd month, "I want you to lead the development of our new security platform. I think you have exactly the right mindset for it." That project became SecureVault, a comprehensive cybersecurity system designed specifically for financial institutions. I was given freedom to architect it from the ground up, making foundational decisions that would shape the entire product. As the system grew in complexity and importance, so did my role. Soon, I was the undisputed expert on SecureVault, the one person who understood every module, every interface, every security protocol. Our original team was small but mighty. Besides Eleanor and Richard, there was Madison Chen, our brilliant UI designer who could make the most complex security features intuitive for non-technical users. Albert Johnson was our database specialist, a quiet genius who could optimize queries like no one else. We worked together seamlessly, each bringing unique strengths to the table. The early days were exhilarating. We would often work until midnight, ordering pizza and debating the best approaches to complex problems. Richard always encouraged these discussions, believing that the best solutions emerged from constructive disagreement. We weren't just colleagues. We became friends, celebrating birthdays, helping each other move apartments, even taking a company camping trip where we unplugged from technology completely. As the architect of SecureVault, I implemented several specialized access protocols that were revolutionary in the industry. The most significant was what I called the progressive authentication system, a layered security approach that required different levels of verification depending on the sensitivity of the data being accessed. What nobody realized was that I had also built in a failsafe mechanism that required my personal verification code every 30 days. This wasn't documented anywhere, it was simply my way of ensuring the system remained secure, even if someone tried to make unauthorized changes to the core architecture. In retrospect, this decision would prove more significant than I ever imagined. Within 3 years, Secure Vault had become the industry standard for financial security. We had contracts with 7 of the 10 largest banks in America processing transactions worth billions of dollars daily. Our $55 million system was the cornerstone of TechVault's success, and I took immense pride in what we had built together. As the company grew from 20 employees to over 100, we maintained our collaborative culture. Richard insisted that we preserve what made us special even as we scaled. Christopher, the founder, was often traveling to meet with clients and investors, but he trusted Richard and Eleanor to keep the company's soul intact. Then came the Series C funding round. The venture capital firm that led the $90 million investment had conditions. They wanted faster growth, more aggressive targets, and a leadership team with experience scaling companies to IPO. The winds of change began to blow, and I felt the first chill when Richard called me into his office one Wednesday afternoon. "They're pushing me to retire," he said quietly, looking older than his 68 years. "The investors think we need someone with experience at larger organizations." "That's ridiculous," I replied, feeling my stomach tighten. "You built this place. You are TechVault." He smiled sadly. "That may be, but Christopher has to answer to the board now. I've had a good run, Randy. Maybe it is time for some new blood." I should have seen the storm coming, but I was too focused on our product, too trusting that the company's values would remain unchanged. 1 month later, Richard retired with a modest ceremony. His replacement was announced immediately, Marcus Williams, formerly the vice president of engineering at Rivaltech, one of our competitors. The golden days of TechVault were about to end, and none of us were prepared for what would follow. Marcus Williams arrived with the confidence of a man who had been hired to fix something. His first all-hands meeting set the tone for his leadership style. TechVault has created some impressive technology. He began standing stiffly in his expensive suit, but the processes here are immature. We need structure, accountability, and professional discipline if we want to reach the next level. The words seemed reasonable enough, but his delivery felt like a rebuke of everything we had built. Within his first week, Marcus implemented a series of changes that transformed our workplace. Gone were the flexible hours that accommodated different working styles. Everyone was now expected to be at their desk from 9 to 6, regardless of when they did their best work. The open-door policy that Richard had championed was replaced with formal meeting requests and rigid reporting structures. "This is how real technology companies operate," Marcus would say, whenever anyone questioned these changes. "We're not a garage startup anymore." Eleanor was the first to push back, advocating for preserving the culture that had made us successful. "The reason our products are exceptional is because we give people freedom to create," she argued during a leadership meeting I was part of. "You're treating engineers like factory workers." Marcus smiled thinly. "With all due respect, Eleanor, this sentimentality is exactly what's holding TechVault back." 2 weeks later, Eleanor announced she was leaving to start her own company. Her departure hit me hard. She had been my champion from the beginning. At her goodbye party held at a bar near the office, because Marcus had banned personal celebrations during work hours, she pulled me aside. "Be careful, Randy," she whispered. "Marcus sees you as a threat. Your knowledge of the system gives you too much power in his eyes." I dismissed her concern at the time. Surely my expertise would be valued regardless of who was in charge. I was wrong. Madison was the next target. Marcus brought in a new design director, Lawrence, who immediately began criticizing Madison's work. Her clean, intuitive interfaces were deemed outdated, and she was instructed to redesign everything according to Lawrence's vision, which prioritized flashy elements over usability. "This is going to confuse our banking clients," Madison protested during a review meeting. "Their security teams are trained on the current interface." "We need to look cutting edge," Lawrence replied, with Marcus nodding in agreement. "Your designs look like they're from 2015. Madison was demoted from design lead to senior designer, then given increasingly menial tasks until she resigned 3 months later. When she stopped by my desk to say goodbye, her eyes were red from crying. It's like they're systematically pushing out everyone from the original team, she said. Watch your back. Albert lasted longer than Madison, but his fate was similar. Marcus reorganized the company and moved Albert from the core Secure Vault team to an internal tools group, effectively sidelining him from the product he had helped build. When Albert objected, pointing out that the database architecture required specialized knowledge, Marcus accused him of not being a team player. Albert started job hunting that same day. As the original team disbanded, I found myself increasingly isolated. Marcus brought in his own people developers from his previous company who had no experience with financial security systems. They were technically competent but lacked the deep understanding of our domain that had made our product exceptional. The new team members treated me with a mixture of resentment and forced deference. I was the system architect who held the keys to the kingdom, but also a remnant of the old regime they had been hired to improve upon. Jeremy, a new lead developer Marcus brought in, would constantly challenge my decisions in meetings. That seems unnecessarily complex, he would say when I explained how certain security protocols worked. We should refactor this to make it simpler. What Jeremy and others failed to understand was that financial security isn't supposed to be simple. The complexity was intentional, creating layers of protection that made Secure Vault virtually impenetrable. Simplifying for the sake of simplifying would create vulnerabilities. Marcus began demanding excessive documentation of everything I had built. While good documentation is important, this felt like an attempt to transfer my knowledge to his team so they could eventually replace me. The deadlines he set for this documentation were impossible to meet while still maintaining the system. I need complete sequence diagrams for all authentication processes by Friday, he would announce on Wednesday afternoon. That's not feasible, I would respond. These processes are intricate and documenting them properly will take weeks, not days. Randy, this constant pushback is becoming a pattern, he would reply, his voice dripping with condescension. Everyone else seems able to meet their deadlines. The pressure was relentless. I started working weekends just to keep up with my regular responsibilities while trying to satisfy Marcus's documentation demands. My anxiety levels skyrocketed. I developed insomnia, often lying awake, worrying about what Marcus would demand next. I started having stress headaches that no amount of ibuprofen could touch. The camaraderie that had once made Tech Vault special was gone. The office was now silent, with everyone focused on their screens, afraid to be seen wasting time by engaging in the collaborative discussions that had once driven our innovation. Team lunches disappeared. After work, drinks became rare. Everyone was too exhausted from walking on eggshells all day. Christopher, the founder, was rarely in the office anymore. The board had him traveling constantly, meeting with potential clients and investors. The few times I saw him, he looked tired and distracted, nodding absently when I tried to raise concerns about the changing culture. Marcus knows what he's doing, Christopher said dismissively. The board is very happy with the direction he's taking us. Despite all this, I remained dedicated to Secure Vault. This system was my baby, my greatest professional achievement. I continued to maintain its integrity, often working behind the scenes to fix issues that the new team members created through their lack of understanding. The system's complexity, once a source of pride, now served as my job security. No one else fully understood how all the pieces fit together. As my annual performance review approached, I hoped it might be an opportunity to address some of these issues. Perhaps if I could speak with Marcus one-on-one, I could help him understand the value of what we had built and how his changes were undermining it. I spent hours documenting my contributions over the past year, the critical issues I had resolved and the improvements I had implemented. I entered that review meeting with cautious optimism. I left it unemployed with a hole in my chest where my professional pride had been. But I had no idea that this ending would be just the beginning of something much bigger than I could have imagined. The morning of my performance review, I dressed with extra care, selecting a professional navy blue pantsuit that I reserved for important meetings. I had prepared meticulously, compiling a detailed report of my contributions over the past year. The document highlighted 3 major security breaches I had prevented before they could affect our clients, a system efficiency improvement that reduced processing time by 22%, and the successful implementation of a new encryption protocol that had received praise from external security auditors. I arrived at the office early, reviewing my notes one last time before the 9:30 meeting. Despite the increasingly hostile environment, I maintained hope that data would speak for itself. My contributions to Secure Vault were measurable and significant. At minimum, I expected a standard cost of living increase of around 4 to 5%, which was typical for our industry. Given my performance, a merit increase on top of that would have been appropriate. The conference room Marcus had booked was one of the small glass enclosed spaces that had replaced our formerly open meeting areas. When I arrived exactly on time, he was already seated with Heather from Human Resources, a recent hire who had been implementing Marcus's more stringent personnel policies. "Come in, Randy," Marcus said without looking up from his laptop. "We'll keep this brief." The phrasing immediately set me on edge. Performance reviews were typically comprehensive discussions about achievements, areas for improvement, and professional development. Brief suggested he had already made his decisions without input. I sat down and opened my folder. I've prepared a summary of my contributions this year. I'd like to start by discussing the security vulnerabilities I identified and resolved in February, which prevented what could have been a significant breach. Marcus glanced at Heather, who gave a small shrug. "That's not necessary," he said, finally closing his laptop. "We're already familiar with your work." The way he said familiar carried a subtle negative connotation, as if my work was somehow problematic rather than exceptional. "Let's cut to the chase," he continued. "The company is implementing more standardized performance metrics, and while your technical skills are adequate, you've shown resistance to our new processes and documentation requirements." Adequate, I had designed the entire system that was now worth $55 million and secured most of the company's revenue. I took a deep breath, determined to remain professional. "I've completed all the documentation that was feasible within the timeframes provided," I responded evenly. Some of the deadlines were simply not realistic given the complexity of the systems involved. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Everyone else has managed to meet their targets. Regardless, we're here to discuss your compensation for the coming year." He slid a paper across the table. I looked down and blinked twice, certain I was misreading the number. $69, I said, unable to keep the disbelief from my voice. "This is an annual increase of $69. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's correct. It works out to about 0.1%. Given your performance issues, you're lucky to even get this." The shock gave way to a flush of anger that rose from my chest to my face. $69. After 5 years of dedication. After building their flagship product. After working nights and weekends. $69 wouldn't even cover a month of the parking garage fee I paid to work downtown. "I don't understand," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I've consistently received excellent reviews until now. I've prevented multiple security crises this year alone. Secure Vault is the reason this company has its current valuation. How does that justify a 0.1% increase when inflation is running at 3.8%? This is effectively a pay cut." Marcus's smile vanished, replaced by a cold stare. Heather shifted uncomfortably in her seat but remained silent. "If you're so valuable, Randy, perhaps you should test that theory in the market," he said. "But let me be clear, this is the offer. Your so-called indispensability is a narrative you've created. No one is irreplaceable." I carefully placed the paper back on the table. "I'd like to understand the specific metrics that led to this decision." That's when Marcus's professional veneer cracked completely. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Unhappy with a $69 raise, there's the door." He sneered, pointing toward the exit. "We have plenty of engineers who would be grateful for your position." The room fell silent. Heather's eyes widened at his outburst, but she quickly composed herself, staring down at her notepad. I felt a curious calm settle over me, the kind that comes when a situation becomes so absurd that emotional detachment is the only rational response. In that moment, I saw Marcus clearly for what he was: a deeply insecure man who felt threatened by knowledge he didn't possess. He wanted to humiliate me into quitting, because firing me would require justification he couldn't provide. I stood up slowly, gathering my folder and straightening my jacket. My external composure belied the rage building inside me, a cold fury that was strangely clarifying. I see, I said simply. Thank you for your time. I walked out without another word, leaving Marcus and Heather sitting there. As I closed the door, I heard him say, "Well, that was dramatic," followed by a forced laugh. Back at my desk, I opened my computer and began methodically transferring personal files to a thumb drive. I didn't delete anything work-related or copy any proprietary code. Despite everything, I remained ethical. Colleagues glanced curiously in my direction, but no one approached. The word had likely already spread through Marcus's network of loyalists. As I was packing up my few personal items, Tina, a junior developer I had mentored, stopped by. "Is it true?" She whispered, eyes wide with concern. "Are you leaving?" "It appears so," I replied, managing a small smile for her benefit. "But what about Secure Vault? Who will maintain it?" The genuine worry in her voice was the first warmth I had felt all day. "I guess that's for Marcus to figure out," I said, surprising myself with how little I now cared. Heather appeared at my desk as I was placing my coffee mug in my bag. "We'll need to do an exit interview," she said stiffly, "and I'll need your badge and company laptop." The exit interview was a formality, with Heather asking standard questions that neither of us cared about. When she asked, "Is there anything that could have been done differently to retain you?" I almost laughed. "A fair performance review based on actual contribution rather than personal animosity might have helped," I replied. She made a non-committal note without meeting my eyes. We both knew this wasn't a real exit interview. It was documentation to protect the company. As I handed over my badge, I felt a strange mixture of loss and liberation. 5 years of my professional life ended with such disrespect. Yet walking out of that building felt like putting down a heavy weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. The drive home was a blur. Traffic on the freeway moved around me like a river flowing past a stone. I felt numb, my mind still processing the abrupt end to what had been the defining role of my career so far. When I finally reached my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. What would I do now? How would I explain this sudden departure to future employers? The questions swirled until exhaustion took over, and I fell into a restless sleep, still wearing my navy blue suit, the symbol of professionalism that had meant nothing in the face of Marcus's contempt. What I didn't know then was that somewhere in the Tech Vault servers a clock had started ticking. The 30-day authentication cycle for my progressive authentication system was about to run without my verification code for the first time in 5 years, and no one at Tech Vault had any idea what was coming. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through blinds I had forgotten to close. For a blissful moment, I existed in the limbo between sleep and full consciousness, free from yesterday's humiliation. Then reality crashed back and I remembered I was unemployed. The initial panic was quickly replaced by a strange sense of calm. For the first time in months, I didn't have to brace myself for another day of Marcus's hostility. I made coffee and sat on my small balcony watching the city come alive below. My phone remained silent. I had expected at least a few messages from former colleagues, but apparently Marcus's influence extended to social ostracism. Around 10:30, my phone finally buzzed. The name on the screen surprised me: Tina Parker, the junior developer I had mentored. I hesitated before answering. "Randy, are you there?" Her voice was pitched higher than usual, tight with anxiety. "I'm here, Tina. Everything okay?" "No, nothing's okay. The system is showing errors no one understands. Authentication failures, database connection issues, weird encryption warnings. Marcus is freaking out, and Jeremy keeps saying it must be something you did before leaving." A cold realization washed over me. In the drama of my departure, I had completely forgotten about my progressive authentication system. It required my personal verification code every 30 days, and today would be the first missed authentication. "What exactly is happening?" I asked, trying to sound merely curious rather than responsible. "It started with performance lag about an hour ago. Then some clients reported access issues. Now the error messages are multiplying faster than anyone can address them. Jeremy tried rebooting the main server cluster, but that just triggered more security exceptions. I hadn't designed the system to self-destruct. The progressive authentication was meant as a security measure, ensuring that any significant architectural changes would require my approval. Without that verification, the system was programmed to gradually restrict access, protecting the sensitive financial data from potentially unauthorized modifications. It was behaving exactly as designed, but no one else knew about this feature, because documenting it would have defeated its purpose as a last resort safeguard. A complex mix of emotions swept through me. There was undeniable satisfaction in knowing that my value was about to become painfully obvious. But there was also professional concern for a system I had built with such care. And lingering beneath both was the hurt of being so casually discarded. "That sounds serious," I said neutrally. "I'm sure Marcus and his team will figure it out." "Randy, please." Tina's voice cracked. "No one understands the core architecture like you do. They're talking about calling you, but Marcus is refusing. He says it would show weakness." "Well, that's his decision to make," I replied, surprised by my own detachment. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and checked TechVault's status page, which was publicly accessible. The cheerful green all systems operational message was still displayed, but that wouldn't last long. Soon they would have to acknowledge the issues to their clients. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Albert, the database specialist, who had been sidelined to the internal tools team. "What did you do?" he asked without preamble, a note of amazement in his voice. "I didn't do anything, Albert. I just left." "Well, whatever you didn't do is causing chaos. The secondary authentication systems are locking everyone out, even admin accounts. The database is reverting to read-only mode. Marcus is running around screaming at everyone." I couldn't help but smile slightly. "Sounds stressful." "It's actually kind of beautiful," Albert admitted, lowering his voice. "But seriously, did you build in some kind of kill switch?" "Not a kill switch. A protection mechanism. The system needs regular verification from its architect. Without it, it assumes there might be a security threat and starts limiting access." Albert whistled. "Brilliant and terrifying. They're going to have to call you." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe Marcus will let the whole thing burn before admitting he needs help." Throughout the day, the calls continued. Madison texted to tell me that her friend, still at TechVault, reported emergency meetings being called every hour. A former colleague from the security team called to ask if I would at least give him hints about how to stop the cascade of errors. I remained politely unhelpful, suggesting they consult the documentation, knowing full well this particular feature was undocumented. Around 4 in the afternoon, TechVault finally updated their status page, showing yellow performance issues indicators for several services. By 5, most indicators had turned red with service disruption warnings. I opened my laptop again and checked the financial news. TechVault's stock had dropped 8% as rumors of a major security issue spread. The company had issued a vague statement about temporary technical difficulties that would be resolved shortly. At 6:15, my phone displayed a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Is this Randy Moretti?" The male voice was tense professional. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Thomas Parker, Chief Financial Officer at TechVault." My eyebrows rose. The CFO himself was calling. Marcus must be beside himself. "Mr. Parker, how can I help you?" "I think you know why I'm calling, Miss Moretti. Our system is experiencing critical failures that began shortly after your departure." "That's unfortunate," I replied evenly. "Our team believes you may have implemented some sort of time bomb in the code." His accusation was cautious testing. "That's not accurate. What I implemented was a security protocol designed to protect the system's integrity. It requires regular verification from the system architect, which was my role until yesterday." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Whatever you call it, we need you to fix it. We're prepared to offer you a consulting contract at double your previous hourly rate to resolve this issue immediately." The offer was tempting but insufficient. They weren't acknowledging what had happened or offering any form of apology for my treatment. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Parker. I have some interviews scheduled for the coming days. Perhaps Marcus's team can solve the problem with the extensive documentation they insisted I create." "Miss Moretti," his voice dropped to almost a whisper, "you don't understand. We process transactions for 7 major banks. We're talking about potential losses of millions of dollars per hour. Name your price." "This isn't about price, Mr. Parker. This is about respect. You should have thought about the consequences before allowing Marcus to force out the person who built your core system." "Please be reasonable," he pleaded. I was reasonable yesterday during my performance review. I was professional when offered an insulting $69 annual raise. I was calm when told I was easily replaceable. The time for reasonable has passed. Good luck with your technical issues. I hung up and turned off my phone, my heart pounding. I had never stood up for myself like that before. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Part of me felt guilty about the clients who would be affected, but another part recognized that this consequence wasn't my creation. It was the result of a company that had devalued expertise and loyalty in favor of politics and control. As evening fell, I sat in my darkening living room, wondering what tomorrow would bring. I had no illusions that this was over. The question was whether TechVault would swallow their pride before the damage became irreversible, and more importantly, what would I demand when they did? By the morning of the second day, what had begun as a technical inconvenience had escalated into a full-blown crisis. I woke early, having slept fitfully, and immediately checked the news. TechVault had made the financial headlines. Major security provider faces system meltdown, stocks plummet. When I turned my phone back on, it immediately began buzzing with notifications. 16 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 37 emails, most from TechVault employees, at various levels of desperation. I scrolled through them quickly, noting the increasing urgency as time had passed. The most recent text was from Tina: complete shutdown now. No client can access anything. Marcus blaming network attack. Nobody believing it. I opened my laptop and navigated to TechVault's client portal. The login page loaded, but when I entered test credentials I had memorized long ago, the system returned a stark message. Authentication services unavailable. Please contact system administrator. This was exactly what the progressive authentication system was designed to do in its final stage. Without verification from the system architect for 30 days, it assumed a security compromise and implemented a complete lockdown. Only my personal master key could reverse it now. My doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I checked through the peephole, I was surprised to see Albert standing there, looking anxious but excited. "You need to turn on the news," he said as soon as I opened the door. "It's absolute chaos." I let him in, and we turned on the financial news channel. A serious-looking anchor was mid-sentence. Sources inside TechVault confirm that their Secure Vault system, which provides security infrastructure for major financial institutions, including First National Bank and Western Trust, has experienced a complete service interruption. A company spokesperson described it as a complex technical issue that our team is working diligently to resolve, but would not provide an estimated time for service restoration. Albert sat on my couch, shaking his head in amazement. They tried everything yesterday. Jeremy convinced Marcus that they could work around whatever security protocol was causing the problem, but every attempt just triggered more lockdowns. It's like the system is alive and fighting back against intruders. "It's not alive," I explained, "just very carefully designed. Each failed attempt to circumvent the security is logged as a potential attack, which escalates the protection measures." Well, it worked. The board called an emergency meeting at midnight. Marcus tried to blame external hackers, but nobody's buying it because the monitoring shows all the issues originating from internal security protocols. I felt a twinge of sympathy for the developers who were undoubtedly working around the clock to solve a problem they couldn't possibly understand. They were collateral damage in this conflict between Marcus and me. "How bad is it for the clients?" I asked. Albert's expression became serious. "Bad. The banks can't process certain transaction types without SecureVault's verification. They've reverted to manual processing for critical transactions, but there's a growing backlog. The estimated loss is around $2 million per hour in transaction fees alone, not counting the reputational damage." My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Thomas Parker again. I showed Albert the screen. "You going to answer this time?" I nodded and put it on speaker. Miss Moretti Parker's voice had lost all its professional polish, replaced by raw panic. "The situation has become critical. We are prepared to offer you a permanent position as Chief Security Architect with full autonomy over your team and a compensation package of $500,000 annually." Albert's eyebrows shot up at the figure, more than triple my previous salary. "That's a generous offer, Mr. Parker," I replied calmly, "but I'm not interested in returning to a company where Marcus Williams is still Chief Technology Officer." Please, Miss Moretti, be reasonable. The board is meeting as we speak. Our stock has dropped 27% since market opening. Our banking clients are threatening to terminate contracts that represent 80% of our revenue. We are facing an existential threat. I understand the severity, Mr. Parker. My terms are non-negotiable. Marcus must go before I will consider helping. There was a pause. Then Christopher Pierce has returned from his vacation. He's requested to speak with you directly. Will you at least take his call? Christopher was the founder, the one person at TechVault who might still command some respect from me. He had built the company from nothing, though his recent absence had allowed the culture to deteriorate. Yes, I'll speak with Christopher. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Christopher Pierce. Randy, his voice sounded tired, strained. I just landed from Tokyo. What the hell is happening to my company? I explained the situation from the beginning, Marcus's systematic dismantling of the original team, the hostile work environment he had created, the insulting performance review, and finally how the security system I had designed was now doing exactly what it was meant to do in the absence of its architect. Christopher listened without interruption. When I finished, he was silent for several moments. I've been away too much, he finally said. I trusted the wrong people to preserve what we built. The board meeting is still in progress. Marcus is arguing that we should rebuild the system from scratch, rather than negotiate with you. That would take months, if not years, I replied, and cost far more than the $55 million the current system is worth. I know. That's what I told them. When I heard what happened, I said something that apparently has become famous already in the company. Apparently, after looking at the logs and realizing who had been terminated, I said, God help us. Who did you just fire? Despite everything, I laughed. It felt good to know that Christopher at least recognized my value, even if it was too late. I need to see you in person, he continued. Can we meet? Name the place. I considered this. A public meeting would be better than going to the TechVault offices where Marcus still held power. The Riverfront Cafe 1 hour from now, I suggested. I'll be there. Christopher agreed, then added Randy for what it's worth. I'm sorry. This isn't how we were supposed to treat people. After hanging up, I turned to Albert, who had been listening intently. You're going to meet with him, he asked. Yes. I want to hear what he has to say. What are you going to demand? Besides Marcus getting fired, obviously. I considered the question carefully. I haven't decided yet, but it needs to be something that ensures this can't happen again, not just to me but to anyone. Albert nodded approvingly. Make them pay Randy. Not just in money, but in changing how they operate. As I prepared to leave for the meeting, my phone chimed with a news alert. TechVault stock had been temporarily halted for trading after falling 35%. The company had just lost nearly 1/3 of its market value in less than 2 days. The crisis had moved beyond a technical failure, or even a financial setback. It was now an existential threat to the company's survival. And I held the only key that could save them. The question was, on what terms would I use it? The Riverfront Cafe sat on a tree-lined street overlooking the city's waterway, far enough from TechVault's downtown offices to avoid running into anyone from the company. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered privacy while still being in a public space. I ordered a coffee and waited, watching boats drift by on the river below. Christopher arrived exactly on time, looking considerably more disheveled than the polished executive I remembered. His normally immaculate suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened with dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he hadn't slept on the Trans-Pacific flight. Thank you for meeting me, he said, sliding into the chair across from mine. He ordered a triple espresso when the server came by, then turned his full attention to me. I've spent the last 12 hours trying to understand how we got here. And what conclusions have you reached? I kept my tone neutral, professional. He ran a hand through his graying hair. That I got so focused on growth that I neglected what made us successful in the first place, our people, especially the people who built our core technology. It was a start, but not enough. It went beyond neglect, Christopher. It was systematic dismantling of the original team. Eleanor, Madison, Albert, and finally me. All pushed out because we represented a culture Marcus wanted to erase. Christopher winced. The board pushed for Marcus. They wanted someone with experience scaling engineering teams at public companies. His resume was impressive. I didn't look closely enough at how he operated. The server brought Christopher's espresso, which he drank in one gulp before continuing. The technical details still aren't clear to me. Our engineers are saying the system has locked itself down and won't accept any administrative overrides. They're calling it a time bomb or backdoor. It's neither, I explained. It's a security protocol designed to protect the system's integrity. If the system doesn't receive verification from its architect for 30 days, it assumes a security compromise and implements increasing restrictions culminating in complete lockdown. It's actually doing exactly what it was built to do, protecting sensitive financial data from unauthorized architectural changes. Christopher's eyes widened. And you're the only one who can provide this verification. Yes. It requires a master key that only I possess. This wasn't malicious, Christopher. It was a precaution against exactly the scenario that played out: someone pushing out the system architect and attempting to make changes without fully understanding the architecture. He nodded slowly. I understand. And in retrospect, it was prudent. But now we need your help to restore the system. Before we discuss that, I said, leaning forward, I need to understand how things went so wrong with my performance review. A $69 annual raise after everything I contributed and then being told to leave when I questioned it. That doesn't happen without approval from above. Christopher's face flushed with what appeared to be genuine anger. I never approved that. Marcus told the board you were demanding an unreasonable increase and had become difficult to work with. He said he had offered you a standard adjustment which you rejected before quitting dramatically. That's not what happened. I believe you. Heather from HR finally came forward this morning with notes from your review that contradict Marcus's version. The $69 wasn't a mistake or a negotiating tactic. It was deliberately insulting, designed to make you quit. The confirmation of what I had suspected brought a fresh wave of anger. Why would he want me gone so badly? Control, Christopher said simply. You represented a power center he couldn't dominate. You knew things no one else knew. People respected your expertise above his authority. For someone like Marcus, that's intolerable. We sat in silence for a moment, watching a sailboat navigate the river currents. Finally, Christopher spoke again. What will it take to get you to help us restore the system? I had given this considerable thought since our phone conversation. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about establishing the right values for the company going forward. I have 3 conditions, I said. First, Marcus must be removed immediately with no golden parachute. His deliberate dismantling of the team and creation of a hostile work environment should be grounds for termination with cause. Christopher nodded without hesitation. That's already in progress. The board voted an hour ago. He'll be escorted out this afternoon. What else? Second, I want to be instated as Chief Technology Officer with full authority over technical decisions and hiring within my department. He blinked in surprise. CTO, that's a significant jump from your previous role. Is it? I designed the system that the entire company depends on. I understand both the technology and the financial security domain better than anyone you could hire externally. And I've just demonstrated how essential my knowledge is. Christopher considered this, then nodded again. That's fair. The board will approve it given the circumstances. And your third condition. Equity in the company. 5% ownership vested immediately. This was the most aggressive of my demands. 5% of a company valued at hundreds of millions before this crisis was substantial. Christopher's eyebrows shot up. That's worth potentially $20 million. Today, it's worth less given how much the stock has fallen, I countered. But yes, it's significant. It ensures that my interests and the company's remain aligned long-term. And it compensates me for the disrespect I've endured and the value I've created that was never properly recognized. He was silent for a long moment, calculating mentally. The board will resist this. Then I'll walk away and watch as TechVault becomes a case study in how to destroy a technology company in 3 days. Your choice. Christopher stared at me with new respect. You've changed, Randy. The woman I hired 5 years ago would never have driven such a hard bargain. The woman you hired 5 years ago believed that good work would be recognized and rewarded appropriately. She's gone. He extended his hand across the table. 3% equity and we have a deal. I didn't move. 5%. Non negotiable. Our eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. Finally, he smiled ruefully. 5% it is. I'll have legal draw up the paperwork immediately. How quickly can you restore the system? Once I have signed contracts in hand, I can begin the process within the hour. Full restoration will take about 12 hours as the system methodically re-verifies and unlocks each component. Christopher stood looking relieved despite the tough negotiation. I'll have the documents delivered to your apartment within 2 hours. In the meantime, I'll announce your appointment as CTO to the company effective immediately upon your signature. And Marcus will be gone before you arrive. We shook hands, and Christopher left to make the arrangements. I remained at the table finishing my coffee and watching the river flow. A weight had lifted from my shoulders, replaced by the anticipation of new challenges ahead. I had stood my ground and won not just compensation, but power and recognition. 3 hours later, with signed contracts securing my position and ownership stake, I walked into TechVault's offices for the first time since my dramatic exit 2 days earlier. The atmosphere was electric with tension and confusion. Employees stared as I passed, whispering behind their hands. Tina was the first to approach me openly. Is it true? She asked. Are you the new CTO? I nodded. Effective immediately. And we have work to do. Word spread quickly. By the time I reached the main engineering floor, a crowd had gathered. Jeremy, who had been Marcus's right hand, looked particularly uncomfortable. Where's Marcus? Someone called out. Mr. Williams is no longer with the company, I replied evenly. Christopher will address the full team later today. For now, our priority is restoring the system. I entered the glass-walled conference room that had been Marcus's domain. It felt symbolic to use this space to begin the healing process. The key engineers followed, including Jeremy, who looked equal parts resentful and relieved. I need access to the primary authentication server, I told them, opening my laptop. They exchanged glances. We've been trying to access that for 2 days, Jeremy said. The security protocols won't let anyone in. They'll let me in, I replied confidently. When they provided terminal access, I entered a complex series of commands followed by a master verification code that existed only in my memory. The system responded immediately. Architect verification accepted. Beginning security protocol reset. A collective exhale filled the room as the first status indicators began changing from red back to yellow. It will take approximately 12 hours for full restoration, I explained. The system needs to methodically verify and unlock each component to ensure no security compromises occurred during the lockdown. As the engineers watched the restoration begin, Christopher entered the room. The murmuring stopped immediately. I've called an all-hands meeting in 30 minutes, he announced. But I wanted to speak with the technical team first. The events of the past few days have exposed serious flaws in our leadership and culture. Effective immediately, Randy Moretti is our new Chief Technology Officer. She has my full confidence and the board's full support to rebuild both our systems and our team culture. Jeremy raised his hand tentatively. What about the projects and directives Marcus initiated? I met his gaze directly. All technical initiatives will be reviewed. Those with merit will continue. Those that don't will be terminated. I'll be meeting with each technical lead individually over the coming days. The message was clear. Things were changing, and those who couldn't adapt would be left behind. As the meeting dispersed, Christopher pulled me aside. The system restoration has already made the news. Our stock jumped 15% in the last hour. I nodded. That's just the beginning. We have a lot of trust to rebuild both internally and with our clients. I know, he said solemnly, and I'm counting on you to lead that effort. Welcome back, Randy. Or should I say welcome to your new role, Miss Chief Technology Officer. For the first time in days, I allowed myself a genuine smile. The path forward would be challenging, but for the first time in too long, it was a path I was excited to travel. 6 months passed like a whirlwind. The day after the system restoration, I stood before the entire company at an all-hands meeting, outlining my vision for TechVault's technical future. The employee reactions ranged from skeptical to hopeful, but all were attentive. They had witnessed firsthand the consequences of poor leadership and were eager for stability. Our technology is only as strong as the team that builds it, I told them. Moving forward, we will prioritize both technical excellence and a healthy work environment. These are not competing goals, they are complementary. My first act as CTO was to conduct a comprehensive review of all technical staff. This wasn't about punishment, but about understanding what talents we had and how they had been misused under Marcus. I discovered brilliant people, languishing in inappropriate roles, and promising juniors who had been overlooked for advancement. The reorganization that followed wasn't without pain. Some of Marcus's hires, particularly those who had embraced his combative management style, chose to leave rather than adapt. Others who had technical skill but had been caught in the toxic culture flourished when given proper direction and respect. My second priority was reaching out to former team members. Madison was the first to return, accepting the position of user experience director with enthusiasm. I never wanted to leave, she admitted during her first day back. But I couldn't stay and watch everything we built be dismantled. Albert returned from the internal tools group to his rightful place leading database architecture, bringing with him innovative ideas that had been suppressed under Marcus. The most surprising return was Eleanor. While she had launched her own successful consulting firm, she agreed to join TechVault's board of directors, providing valuable perspective on maintaining culture through growth. Rebuilding client trust proved more challenging than restoring our internal team. I personally visited each of our major banking clients, taking responsibility for the service interruption, while also explaining the security measures that had triggered it. Most appreciated the candid approach, though all requested additional safeguards to prevent future disruptions. We've implemented a distributed verification system, I explained to the CIO of First National during one such meeting. While still secure, it no longer depends on any single individual. This was perhaps my most significant technical change to Secure Vault. The progressive authentication system had served its purpose, but I recognized the flaw in making any system dependent on one person. The new architecture maintained rigorous security while distributing authority among a small, carefully vetted team. The company's financial recovery exceeded expectations. 3 months after the crisis, our stock had not only rebounded but reached new highs, as the market recognized our strengthened leadership team and renewed client commitments. My 5% ownership, which had seemed like such an aggressive demand during negotiations, was now worth considerably more than when I had asked for it. As for Christopher, our working relationship evolved into one of mutual respect. He focused on external relationships and strategic direction while granting me complete autonomy over technical matters. We established weekly dinners to ensure alignment conversations that often extended for hours, as we discussed everything from architectural decisions to philosophical approaches to leadership. I still can't believe how close we came to losing everything, he remarked during one such dinner. All because Marcus couldn't tolerate someone knowing something he didn't. It's a common failing in tech leadership, I replied, confusing authority with expertise. The most profound changes were in our company policies. We implemented transparent compensation structures with clear metrics for increases. Performance reviews became collaborative discussions rather than top-down judgments. We established minimum annual increases tied to cost of living, ensuring no one would ever face the insult of a $69 raise again. I also insisted on documentation requirements that were reasonable and purposeful. While comprehensive documentation remained important, we recognized that some knowledge exists in the minds of experienced developers and can't always be fully captured in writing. The solution was overlapping expertise rather than treating team members as replaceable parts. The crisis had forced me to recognize my own worth in ways I might never have otherwise. Before, I had believed that technical excellence would speak for itself. Now I understood that advocating for oneself is not arrogance but necessity in environments where politics can overshadow performance. This lesson shaped my leadership style. I became known for publicly recognizing contributions, ensuring that credit flowed to those who earned it regardless of their title or tenure. Junior developers found in me a champion who would amplify their ideas in meetings with senior leadership. "You've changed the entire feel of the department," Tina told me 6 months into my tenure as CTO. She had recently been promoted to lead a development team, recognition long overdue. "People are excited to come to work again." That was perhaps the most gratifying feedback. Beyond the technical innovations, beyond the financial recovery, we had rebuilt a culture where creativity thrived because people felt valued. On the anniversary of my dramatic departure and return, Christopher organized a small celebration for the leadership team. As we raised glasses, he proposed a toast. "To Randy, who taught us that sometimes the most valuable systems are the ones we don't even know exist until they're gone." The laughter that followed held no bitterness, only the shared understanding of a difficult lesson well learned. Later that evening, as I drove home, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The humiliation of that performance review had felt like an ending, but it had actually been the beginning of something far more significant than I could have imagined. I had discovered a strength I didn't know. I possessed the courage to walk away from disrespect even when staying seemed safer. I had learned that knowing your value isn't enough. Sometimes you must be willing to demonstrate it in ways that cannot be ignored. And perhaps most importantly, I had found that leadership isn't about technical knowledge alone, but about creating environments where everyone can contribute their best work. The $69 raise that was meant to diminish me had instead become the catalyst for transformation, both personal and organizational. Sometimes the greatest growth comes from our most painful experiences, if we have the courage to learn from them rather than just endure them. So, what about you? Have you ever stood your ground when undervalued at work? Was there a time when walking away led to something better than what you left behind? Share your story in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this journey of workplace justice, hit that subscribe button for more tales of professional redemption. Remember to like this video if you believe everyone deserves to be valued for their contributions. Thank you for listening, and may you always know your worth is not determined by those who fail to see it.